So tonight we're going to have a quick video on how to lubricate your fan instead of just throwing it into the trash and buying a new one. So we've got our Cool Master fan. Bought this at Rose's 2 years ago. Last year I had to take it all apart and re-lubricate the bearing so it would run, and it's lasted for another year, so I figured I'd just go ahead and do that again. So the first thing we need to do, well, I've already actually done that, but if you look around the ring of this, it's got screws that hold this front cage on. So we've taken those off. Now we shall remove the cage. And that leaves us with the fan to take off. I think it's got a screw in there somewhere, but I think there's some screws on the back. It's been a year since I've done this, so I'm going to have to remember how to do it. So anyway, that's it for phase one. Right, if you can see that little Phillips head screw that attaches the fan blade to the shaft there on the motor. That will get it, when we take this off, that'll get us to the front bearing, but there's also a rear bearing, so we're going to take some more of it apart. So I'll be back when I have done that. Okay, so as you can see, oopsie. Oh, there's Lincoln the dog. He's not ready to he's not ready to supervise just yet. But so now we have exposed the top of the motor. If I remember correctly, oops, let me get out of there. We have 4 screws to take out of this housing, and the whole front should pull out, allowing us access to that rear bearing. And I think I hear some tea water being boiled. Do have to be careful when you take this fan blade out to grasp it around the collar and not by the fan blades, otherwise you might bend them. They are only aluminum, so gotta be careful with that. Okay, on to the next step. We pulled that little front part of the engine out. You got to, can't remember all the names of all of those little parts anyway. You can see that right here, this is going to need to be lubricated. Still got a little oil on it, but it's pretty dry. And then of course you have the bearing in the front there. So looking down into the engine, oops, get out of the light here. You can see that's where it goes in, that sleeve bearing right there. And we'll clean up some of the pet hair out of there too, because that's one of the things about having a German Shepherd. He sheds like there's no tomorrow. It doesn't matter what season it is. So we'll get that cleaned up, and we will get that lubricated. We'll get this thing back together. You can see we've got this part disassembled. Oopsie. But now this whole piece actually lifts out of there. And voila, there's the sleeve bearing. There's a shaft that goes through there. Yeah, you can probably see the little key area near the end of the shaft there. That's where that set screw goes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to lubricate that bearing right there. It's really not even a bearing, it's just a sleeve bearing. So there's no ball bearings or any moving parts to it. It's just metal on metal pretty much. So we're going to do that with this stuff right here, 3-in-1. Notice that says, if I got that right, motor oil. Not motor oil like you would put in your car, but in other words, electric motor oil. This is made for this purpose. So don't get, if you're going to do this at home, don't get regular 3-in-1. It simply will not last. But if you get this motor oil, which I got at the Ace Hardware, so it's fairly easy to find. This, like I've said previously, my last lube job lasted a year, so this stuff really stays on the moving parts. So we're going to get this lubed up in just a minute. Moving much more freely than it was before. It was almost seized up. Probably just due to dirt, because the shaft did not really show any real damage. So a little bit though, but not too much. So now we will put that back into there, and we will bolt it back up and see how it turns. That back in there. We haven't put any screws back in there yet, but we will see if it turns, and that is so much better than it was before. I could barely turn it with my fingers. Of course, it's not much to turn it on, but That's pretty good. So we're going to bolt this thing back up, put the blade back on, put the cover back on because that's safety first, and then we'll see how it runs. Manual test here. Seems to be turning quite freely. So let's get this cage on and test it out. Success. Well, about 95% success. It will not run on high without some vibration and noise, and I think that's just because that shaft has endured a little damage from the grit that was in it. But anyway, it's running, so we're going to put it back where it belongs, and they'll get some cool air across us. Lincoln is pleased with our progress. Aren't you, Lincoln? Oh, yes, you are. Yes, that's a good boy.